police officer rescues abandoned puppy. 10 years later, the pup saves his life in a stunning turn of events that proves fate's mysteries. The rain fell in heavy sheets, casting a dark veil over the city. The streets glistened under the flickering streetlights, creating a world that seemed both beautiful and haunting. Officer Elias Hawthorne tightened his grip on the steering wheel as he drove through the slick roads, his mind focused on the emergency call that had pulled him from the warmth of his home. What awaited him in the shadows? As he pulled into a narrow alley, the sound of raindrops hitting the pavement echoed around him. Elias stepped out of his car, the cold air biting at his skin. He shone his flashlight into the darkness, the beam cutting through the night like a knife. Suddenly, a soft whimper pierced the stillness, drawing his attention deeper into the alley. What could be hiding there? Elias followed the sound, his heart racing with a mix of concern and curiosity. There, huddled against the damp bricks, was a small puppy, shivering and alone. Its fur was matted, and its eyes were wide with fear. The sight tugged at Elias's heartstrings. "Hey there, little one," he said softly, kneeling down to the puppy's level. "You're not alone anymore." The puppy stared at him, uncertain yet intrigued. Elias extended his hand slowly, palm up, allowing the puppy to sniff him. "It's okay. I won't hurt you," he reassured, his voice gentle. The puppy took a cautious step forward, drawn to the warmth of his kindness. In that moment, something shifted between them, an unspoken connection forming in the cold night air. As the puppy approached, Elias wrapped it in his jacket, feeling its tiny body tremble against him. A wave of responsibility washed over him. Could he really take care of this innocent creature? He had a job to do, but this moment felt like a turning point. "I'll protect you," he whispered, a silent promise settling in his heart. He could not foresee how deeply this small life would change him. With the puppy cradled in his arms, Elias began to walk back to his car, the rain still pouring down. He could feel the warmth of the little body against him and knew he had stumbled upon something special. "What should I call you?" he mused aloud, glancing down at the puppy. "How about Max? You look like a Max." The puppy tilted its head, as if considering the name. Elias chuckled softly, the sound breaking the tension of the night. "Max it is then." As he settled into the driver's seat, Max snuggled into his lap, still shaking, but now with a hint of trust. Elias stroked the puppy's head, feeling a surge of affection. "You and I are going to be just fine," he murmured. The rain continued to fall, but it no longer felt cold and lonely. Instead, it felt like a new beginning, a chance for both of them to find solace in each other. The sirens in the distance faded into the background as Elias drove away from the alley, the dark world behind him slowly transforming with the promise of companionship. He had no idea what challenges lay ahead, but in that moment, he felt a sense of hope. Max was more than a puppy. He was a reminder that even in the darkest times, kindness could light the way. As they drove through the rain-soaked streets, Elias glanced down at Max, who was now resting peacefully, the tension easing from his tiny body. "We've got a lot to learn from each other, buddy," Elias said softly, a smile breaking across his face. "Let's see where this adventure takes us." As the days turned into weeks, Officer Elias Hawthorne found himself adjusting to a new routine, one that included the small bundle of joy he had rescued on that stormy night. Max, the puppy who had once shivered alone in the dark, now bounded happily beside Elias, his tail wagging with excitement at every opportunity. During the early days of their companionship, Elias remembered how Max would eagerly tug at the leash, pulling him towards new adventures. "Come on, Max, we have to check the park today," Elias would say, chuckling as the puppy's energy seemed endless. The pair ventured into neighborhoods, where Max would greet every passerby, his friendly demeanor winning hearts everywhere they went. However, Elias's job was not without its challenges. The weight of his duties bore down on him, especially during long shifts filled with difficult cases. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day, Elias sat in his living room, staring blankly at the wall. The case of a young offender weighed heavily on his mind, stirring feelings of frustration and sadness. Max, sensing his distress, quietly approached and rested his head on Elias's knee. It was a simple gesture, but it spoke volumes. "It's hard, buddy," Elias sighed, scratching Max behind the ears. "Sometimes I just don't know what to do." Max looked up at him with trusting eyes, as if to say that everything would be okay. In those moments of struggle, Max became more than just a pet. He was a balm for Elias's troubled soul. On days when darkness loomed over his heart, Max would curl up beside him, providing warmth and comfort. Elias often found himself talking to Max as if he were a confidant. "You know, Max, sometimes the world feels unfair," he would say softly, contemplating the choices he had to make as an officer of the law. Their connection deepened through shared experiences, both joyful and painful. When Elias faced personal losses, like the passing of his father, Max was there, his presence a silent reminder that he was not alone. One night, as Elias sat on the porch, tears streaming down his face, Max snuggled close, offering warmth and understanding. "I miss him so much, Max," Elias whispered, his voice shaky. Max responded by nuzzling closer, as if he understood the weight of Elias's sorrow. One evening, as they strolled through their neighborhood, Elias paused to watch the sunset. The sky was ablaze with colors, yet his heart felt heavy. "Look at that, Max," he murmured, pointing at the vibrant hues. "Life can be beautiful, but it can also hurt." Max turned his head, ears perked up, as if acknowledging the beauty and pain intertwined in life. Despite the struggles, there was joy in their daily routine. Elias would often bring Max along on his patrols, and the dog thrived in the excitement of meeting new people and exploring new places. "You're my little partner, aren't you?" Elias would say, ruffling Max's fur as they walked through the park, a place filled with laughter and play. Max had a knack for making friends, drawing smiles from children and adults alike. "What a good dog," a child would exclaim, reaching out to pet him. Max would happily oblige, his tail wagging furiously as he soaked in the affection. However, even during these lighter moments, the burden of his responsibilities never fully left Elias. He found himself questioning the nature of justice and mercy, especially as he encountered cases where young lives were on the line. It was during one such case that he sat on the edge of his bed, deep in thought. Max, ever observant, jumped up beside him and rested a paw on Elias's leg. "What do you think, buddy?" he asked, looking into Max's big brown eyes. "Is it right to punish someone for a mistake, even if they're just a kid?" Max tilted his head, seemingly pondering the question, and Elias couldn't help but smile at the thought. "You know, I wish things were simpler." As the days passed, Elias and Max continued to grow together. The bond they shared was becoming more profound, built on trust, love, and the unspoken understanding that they would always be there for each other, no matter the challenges that lay ahead. Elias Hawthorne sat at the kitchen table, staring at the stack of papers in front of him. The rain pattered softly against the window, a familiar sound that usually brought him comfort. Tonight, however, it only added to the weight resting on his shoulders. He had received a call earlier in the day, one that had left him feeling torn. A young man had been caught shoplifting a small item, something that seemed so minor compared to the consequences he would face. "Max," Elias said softly, looking down at the loyal dog lying at his feet. Max lifted his head, his big brown eyes searching Elias's face. "What should I do?" Max tilted his head, his ears perked up, as if he understood the dilemma. Elias leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. He felt the tension rising within him, a storm brewing just beneath the surface. His duty as an officer told him to make the arrest, but his heart questioned whether it was the right thing to do. The young man was just a kid, after all. Elias thought about his own youth, how easy it was to make mistakes. He had been fortunate to have had support, but not everyone was so lucky. The young man had a troubled background, and Elias could not help but feel compassion for him. "Max, "What do you think?" Elias asked again, his voice barely above a whisper. Max stood, walked over, and rested his head on Elias's knee, offering silent comfort. The bond they shared was powerful, and Elias often found solace in Max's presence during his most challenging moments. As night fell, Elias tried to sleep, but his mind raced. Images of the young man's face haunted him. He could see the fear and desperation in the boy's eyes, mirroring the uncertainty Elias felt within himself. He rolled over, unable to find a comfortable position, guilt gnawing at him like a hungry wolf. "Why does it have to be this way?" he muttered to the darkness. Max, sensing his distress, jumped onto the bed and curled up beside him, providing warmth and reassurance. Elias reached down, stroking Max's soft fur, grateful for the dog's unwavering loyalty. In the early morning light, Elias prepared for the day ahead. He had made his decision, but doubt still lingered in his mind. He could hear the sirens in the distance and felt the weight of his badge as he put it on. "I just hope I can do the right thing," he murmured to Max, who gave a soft bark in response. They arrived at the precinct, and Elias's heart raced. He checked in with his partners, who were already discussing the day's assignments. "You ready for another day, Elias?" one of them teased, but Elias only smiled weakly in response. As the day unfolded, the moment of truth approached. Elias found himself standing at the door of the young man's house, the arrest warrant clutched tightly in his hand. He could hear Max's soft breathing behind him, a reminder of the support he had. "Stay here, boy," Elias instructed, giving Max a reassuring pat. He stepped forward, knocking on the door. A moment later, it swung open, revealing the young man, looking startled and fearful. "Elias? What are you doing here?" the boy asked, his voice trembling. Elias took a deep breath, his heart pounding. "We need to talk," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. As they engaged in conversation, Elias felt the weight of his duty pressing down on him. "Look, I know what I did was wrong," the young man admitted, his eyes wide with fear. "But I didn't mean to hurt anyone." Elias's mind raced. He thought of the boy's life, the choices he had made, and how a single mistake could lead to a lifetime of consequences. He glanced back at Max, who watched intently from the porch, sensing the tension in the air. "Sometimes we all make mistakes," Elias said slowly, "but there are ways to fix them without ruining your life." The young man's eyes widened, hope flickering in his expression. "You mean, you're not going to arrest me?" Elias felt a surge of compassion as he weighed his options. "Let's talk about this. There are programs that can help you. You don't have to face this alone," he replied, feeling the moral weight lift slightly from his shoulders. Max barked softly, and Elias smiled, grateful for his loyal companion. In that moment, he knew he had made the right choice, one that honored both his duty and his compassion. They would find a way to help, together. The night was darker than usual, shadows creeping along the walls of the narrow alleyways as Officer Elias Hawthorne prepared for the operation ahead. He stood in front of the police station, the hum of activity around him fading into a distant buzz. The urgent call had come only moments ago, sending chills down his spine. This was not just another night, the stakes were high, and the danger felt palpable. Elias glanced at his watch, the hands ticking closer to the operation's start. "Stay safe, Max," he whispered, looking down at the loyal dog who lay curled on the couch at home. Max's ears perked up at the sound of his name, his big brown eyes watching Elias with an unwavering gaze. "Don't worry," Elias said, forcing a smile. "I'll be back before you know it." He reached down to scratch Max behind the ears, feeling the warmth of his furry companion. But as he stepped out into the cold night, a sense of foreboding wrapped around him like a heavy blanket. As Elias arrived at the operation site, he could see the tension in the air. Other officers moved swiftly, their faces serious and focused. "Elias, you ready?" Sergeant Thompson asked, his voice steady but laced with urgency. "Yeah, just give me a moment," Elias replied, taking a deep breath. He closed his eyes for a brief second, trying to drown out the noise and remember Max's calm presence. "It's just another job," he told himself, but the words felt hollow. The operation began smoothly at first. Officers moved in sync, each member aware of their roles. However, as they approached the target location, everything changed in an instant. Explosive sounds erupted, shattering the night's stillness. Elias was thrown to the ground, pain shooting through his body like lightning. He blinked, trying to regain his focus as chaos unfolded around him. "Elias, get back!" someone shouted, but the world around him spun out of control. He felt the weight of despair settle in his chest as he tried to push himself up. Blood trickled from a wound on his arm, and the realization of his vulnerability hit him hard. Meanwhile, at home, Max sensed the shift in the air. His instincts kicked in, and he stood up, pacing anxiously. Elias always came back, but tonight felt different. The usually calm dog began to whine, his ears flat against his head. "Something's wrong," he seemed to say with his eyes. Without a second thought, Max dashed for the door. He scratched at it, barking loudly, desperate to break free. The door swung open, and he bolted into the night, the cold air hitting him like a wave. He raced through the streets, driven by an unbreakable bond that guided him toward Elias. Back at the scene, Elias lay on the ground, feeling the darkness close in around him. Just when he thought hope was lost, he heard a familiar bark cut through the chaos. His heart raced as he turned his head, struggling to focus. "Max," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Max appeared, fur matted and eyes fierce, barking with all his might. The sight of his loyal companion ignited a spark within Elias. "I'm here, boy," he called out, a mix of relief and pain washing over him. Max rushed toward Elias, dodging the chaos and drawing the attention of nearby officers. "Get him out of here," one shouted, and Max continued to bark, urging them toward his fallen friend. In that moment, Elias felt a wave of courage wash over him. "I'm okay, buddy. Just stay close," he managed to say, even as the darkness threatened to pull him under. The officers finally reached Elias, their faces a mix of urgency and determination. As they worked to stabilize him, Max stood guard, his presence a reminder that he was not alone. "Good boy, Max," Elias murmured, tears welling in his eyes. "You came for me." The bond they shared was stronger than any fear, a testament to their loyalty and love. As the team lifted Elias onto a stretcher, Max trotted alongside, ready to protect his friend no matter the cost. Together, they faced the unknown, their hearts intertwined in a promise that would echo through the darkest nights. Elias lay on the cold ground, his body aching and bruised. The darkness enveloped him, and he could barely hear the distant sounds of sirens and shouting. Panic pressed down on him, making it hard to breathe. He tried to call for help, but his voice was weak and hoarse. Just then, a familiar sound cut through the chaos. It was a bark, loud and fierce. Elias's heart raced as he realized who it was. "Max!" he called out, his voice barely a whisper, but deep inside, he hoped that the dog would hear him. Max was not just any dog. He was Elias's loyal companion, and he knew something was wrong. The barking grew louder as Max raced through the alley, his paws pounding against the pavement. Elias could feel the warmth of hope rising within him as he strained to see through the darkness. With a sudden rush, Max burst into the scene. His eyes were wide, filled with determination. He stood tall, a protective stance, barking at the shadows that surrounded Elias. The rescue team, alerted by the commotion, turned their attention to the source of the noise. "Over here!" one of the officers shouted, pointing towards Max. "The dog has found him!" Max dashed towards Elias, his tail wagging furiously, despite the danger. He reached Elias's side and nudged him with his nose, urging him to respond. "Hey, buddy," Elias murmured, trying to reach out a hand. "I'm okay, just a little hurt." Instead of calming down, Max continued to bark, his voice a blend of urgency and concern. Elias could see the worry in his eyes, and it broke his heart. "I'll be fine, Max. I promise," he said softly, trying to reassure his brave friend. The rescue team rushed forward, and within moments, they were kneeling beside Elias. "We've got you, Officer Hawthorne," one of the paramedics said, checking his injuries. "Just hang in there." Max remained close, watching every move they made. He seemed to sense the tension in the air, and as the team worked, he kept barking, as if reminding them to be quick. "It's okay, Max. They're here to help me," Elias said, still stroking the dog's fur, finding comfort in his presence. The paramedics quickly assessed Elias's injuries. "We need to get him stabilized and to the hospital," another officer said, urgency in his voice. They carefully lifted Elias onto a stretcher, and Max followed closely beside them, his eyes never leaving Elias. As they carried Elias away, he looked at Max. "You were amazing, buddy. You saved my life," he said, tears of gratitude welling in his eyes. Max let out a soft whine, as if he understood every word. The ride to the hospital was a blur. Elias could barely focus on what was happening around him. All he could think about was Max. "Stay with me, boy," he whispered as they entered the hospital. "Please." In the waiting area, the doctors took Elias away for treatment. Max sat at the entrance, his loyal eyes fixed on the doors. Hours passed, and the worry crept into Elias's heart. He wanted to see Max, to assure him that everything would be all right. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Elias was wheeled back to his room. He spotted Max lying at the foot of the bed, his body tense but eyes bright. "Hey, there you are," Elias said, relief washing over him. "I missed you." Max jumped up, his tail wagging as he licked Elias's hand. Elias chuckled softly, feeling the warmth of their bond. "You're my hero," he said, his voice breaking. "I don't know what I would do without you." As the nurse entered the room, she smiled at the sight. "Looks like you have a very devoted friend here, Officer Hawthorne," she said. Elias nodded, his heart swelling with appreciation for Max. In that moment, surrounded by the sterile smell of the hospital and the sounds of beeping machines, Elias understood the true depth of their connection. Max was not just a dog, he was family. They had been through so much together, and now they would face this challenge too. As the sun began to set outside the window, casting a warm glow in the room, Elias thought about how this moment would forever change their lives. "We're in this together, Max," he promised, knowing that no matter what, they would always support each other, just as they had always done. In the months that followed the harrowing night of the rescue, Elias Hawthorne found himself on a path of healing. Each day was a new challenge, but he was never alone. Max, his loyal dog, stayed by his side, offering comfort and friendship. Together, they faced the physical and emotional scars left by the incident. Elias often sat on the porch of his small house, sunlight filtering through the trees. He watched Max chase butterflies, his tail wagging joyfully. Elias smiled at the sight. "You always find joy in the little things, don't you, buddy?" he said softly, stroking Max's head. The dog looked up, his big brown eyes filled with love. The mornings were filled with routine. Elias would wake up and take a moment to breathe deeply, appreciating the calm that surrounded him. He would then head to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. Max patiently waited, his nose twitching as the smell of bacon filled the air. "Just a little longer, Max," Elias would tease, laughing as the dog whimpered in anticipation. As Elias's body healed, he began to take walks with Max in the neighborhood. At first, he moved slowly, his muscles still weak from the injuries, but with each step, he felt stronger. Max would trot beside him, keeping pace and occasionally looking back to make sure Elias was okay. "You're my best cheerleader, you know that?" Elias would say, chuckling. Max responded with a bark, as if to agree. During these walks, Elias started to notice the world around him more. He saw children playing in the park, laughter ringing in the air. He watched as families enjoyed picnics and friends gathered to chat. The simple moments that he had once overlooked now felt precious. "It's nice to see people happy, isn't it, Max?" he remarked one day, sitting on a bench under a large oak tree. Max lay at his feet, his eyes half closed, soaking up the sun. One afternoon, while walking, they met Mrs. Thompson, an elderly woman who lived nearby. She often fed birds in her garden. "Hello, Elias, and hello to you too, Max," she called out with a warm smile. "How are you both doing?" Elias smiled back, feeling a sense of connection. "We're doing well, thank you, Mrs. Thompson. Just enjoying the sunshine." Max wagged his tail, and Elias added, "He's keeping me on my toes." Mrs. Thompson laughed. "A good dog is a treasure. You two are lucky to have each other." Elias nodded, realizing how true her words were. Max had not only been a companion, but a source of strength. As the weeks passed, Elias found himself slowly opening up to those around him. He began to talk to his colleagues at work about his feelings and the struggles he faced. One evening, after a long day, he confided in Officer Rodriguez, a fellow officer. "Sometimes it's hard to deal with everything. I feel like I'm still carrying the weight of that night," Elias admitted, his voice low. Rodriguez nodded, understanding. "It's okay to feel that way, Elias. Healing takes time. Just remember, you're not alone in this." Elias looked at Max, who was lying at his feet, and felt a wave of gratitude. At home, Elias learned from the unconditional love Max gave. He began to practice gratitude each day. He would sit with Max, reflecting on what made him happy. "Today, I'm thankful for you, Max. You've helped me heal in ways I didn't think were possible," he said one evening, stroking the dog's fur. As summer turned to fall, the days grew shorter, but their bond only deepened. One bright afternoon, they walked to the park again, the leaves crunching underfoot. The sun shone brightly, and Elias felt a sense of peace wash over him. "Look at this place, Max. It's beautiful, isn't it?" he said, taking a deep breath. Max barked happily, running ahead to chase a squirrel. Elias watched him, feeling a warmth in his heart. He knew that this journey of healing was not just about recovering from pain. It was about finding joy again and celebrating the love that had transformed his life. As they strolled together, Elias reflected on how much he had changed. He recognized that the bond he shared with Max was a testament to the power of love and loyalty. "You've saved me, buddy," he whispered, as they walked side by side in the golden light of the setting sun. Share this story if you believe that love can conquer even the toughest challenges. Leave a comment about how a loyal companion has made a difference in your life, and subscribe for more inspiring tales like this one.